Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
Sam, it's okay to sleep now.
No, I can't do it, man. Can't do it.
Yeah, right. You'll probably have like nightmares given the last couple weeks of your life.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the first 2 weeks of the year are, this is probably the biggest slog of the whole year. Going from CES to the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. Two pretty solid weeks of stuff that's going on, and it's over now, so we can move on.
For now, yeah. And it's interesting because doing those two shows back to back, which we'll talk about as we get into the podcast, informs your take. Sort of one informs the other.
Yes.
So it's an interesting sort of dichotomy. But, first and foremost, we talk about what we're driving. Oh, before I get there, I did it. I finally did it. I made a Spotify playlist. And so most importantly, I need your feedback. If you have a chance to check it out, or if you've already checked it out, I need to know if my taste is bad.
Well, I think that's pretty much a given, isn't it?
Yeah, it probably is. It's like I have made the playlist equivalent of plaid interior, but not like GTI plaid, like terrible Pacer plaid.
Oh,
yeah,
that's painful.
So when you have a chance, and this is kind of open to whoever's listening, I put a link out there via Facebook and Twitter, because certainly I got here with our Led Zeppelin discussion a while ago. I was like, I should make a playlist. So there's lots of Zeppelin on it, which is good.
Speaking of Zeppelin, have you ever heard Greta Van Fleet?
Yes, Greta Van Fleet is very good, and they sound like they grew up.
That's what they were playing as the lead-in music to the Ram press conference on Monday morning.
Yeah, I thought they were from that area. They're from Michigan, I think.
I think so. I seem to recall hearing that somewhere.
Yeah, and they're very young, so they sound good.
And the singer sounds just like Robert Plant in his prime.
Yeah, which, I mean, okay. I
find that a great thing.
It is. They're really good. They started. It's funny because we've got this collection of folks at the agency. We're all roughly the same age, and so we have these. It's like High Fidelity, but not as cool as the movie was. So we have these discussions at the end of a meeting. We'll often just devolve into talking about rock and roll. And so that Greta Van Fleet sort of went around our agency Slack, like, "Hey, check these guys out. They sound, listen to what they sound like." And so, yes, I'm glad that they're getting some notice because they're kind of young, they're kind of new, and yeah, there's none of that on the playlist yet. I should go pick some. They just released I think they released a full length because they had an EP. So
yeah. All right. Enough of that.
Moving on. Yes. So we're driving things, and you go first.
Yeah. So, a lot of the automotive media that is not from Detroit comes from California and other warm and sunny places. And so, we have this kind of running joke with all of them, that have to fly in here every year in January that, we have a special standing order for, frigid temperatures and a snowstorm, usually on the Friday or Saturday right before they fly into town to start the show. And this year did not disappoint. We had temperatures in the single digits on Saturday prior to the start of the show, and it snowed. Snowed on Friday and Saturday, so it was perfect weather. And given that given that standing weather order that we have, I was fortunate enough this past week to have scheduled a Jeep Compass with their 4-wheel drive system, and it wasn't the Trailhawk that I originally thought I was getting. It's the Limited, but it's the next best thing. And as much as people gave Jeep grief, I think when the original Compass debuted, and in many ways it was utterly justified. The fact is, even though we're talking about a vehicle that's based on a front wheel drive crossover platform, Jeep does not disappoint. I mean, they may take a front, transverse engine unibody platform that, it comes based with, standard with front wheel drive, but when they put 4-wheel drive on it, it's an honest to goodness Jeep.
Jeeps drive like Jeeps too.
Yeah, and especially the Trailhawk version, which, like I said, I didn't have the Trailhawk. I had the Limited, but the Trailhawk. I actually drove the Trailhawk last summer at the Chrysler Chelsea Proving Grounds here in Michigan, and actually drove Trailhawk versions of all the Jeeps, the Renegade, the Compass, the Cherokee, and the Wrangler over the off-road course that they have there. And we're talking, a serious off-road test course, 16 inches of water, or muck actually is more like it. And, over boulders and logs and all this stuff. And the Compass, handled it with no issue at all. So when I found out I was getting a Compass, during Auto Show week, it's like, yes, no, this will be easy to get to and from Detroit. And it worked great, in some pretty nasty weather a couple of the days.
So even the old Compass was a great friend in terrible weather. It was not a great car, but it just, it was definitely sure-footed and it was comfortable enough. And that's especially after they refreshed the interiors. It was an okay place. It was still a little loud and whatever, but it drove well. And even those cars, when you got them equipped the right way, they were way more capable than you'd expect. And my question now for the Compass is, it looks like a little mini Grand Cherokee, especially in limited trim. It almost feels that way. It's nice and it looks good, and it's based on the 500X, so it's pretty good to drive. Way better than the Renegade, in my opinion. And so where does it leave the Cherokee, though? The Cherokee is just slightly larger, really, it seems. Like it almost seems like the Jeep models are right on top of each other, size-wise.
Yeah, the Cherokee is a little bit bigger. The Compass is improved over the first generation model in virtually every way. And I say virtually, and I'll come back to that, the stipulation there in a moment. But, in terms of its looks, its interior, the packaging is much better. Ride quality, combination of both, ride quality and its all-weather handling capability. It was really, it was a really pleasant vehicle to drive. It was absolutely sure-footed. It had some good winter tires on there. And I would have, no qualms about, recommending the Compass to pretty much anybody that was looking for something, especially if they lived in an area, where they do get some bad weather, and, want something that was able to handle that. It's fairly roomy, even on, some particularly nasty roads in Detroit, it just swallowed that stuff up with no problem at all. And, because of the really frigid temperatures we've had over the last several weeks, I noticed the other day when I was driving home at the end of an early day when it was still light out along I-94, there were several areas where there were pretty big craters forming, where the water had seeped in underneath, froze, expanded it up, and then it collapsed back down, and so it was starting to form a crater, and there was going to be some pretty nasty potholes there in the next week or so. And, it just glided over them without any issue at all. The only complaint I have about the Compass at this stage, as a compact crossover goes, is the engine, because it still has the 2.4 liter, what they call the Tiger Shark, which, its history goes back about a decade to when Chrysler did a joint project with Hyundai and Mitsubishi to create this 2.4 liter engine architecture. And I think ultimately Mitsubishi, pretty much dropped out of that project, and left only Chrysler and did I say Mitsubishi dropped out? Hyundai dropped out.
Hyundai. That's the Jima engine, though, right?
Yeah. So it's built here in Michigan, and it's always been a pretty unrefined engine as modern four cylinders go.
What I always thought was weird, like, yes, in Chrysler products it is, but in the Hyundai version, it's not bad.
Well, the Hyundai version I think is quite different.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, Hyundai kind of pulled out and went their own way, and their engine is pretty significantly different. So, it's always been, kind of noisy and not particularly powerful, not particularly fuel efficient. It got better when they added the Fiat multi-air system to the valve train, but it's still not a particularly refined engine. The Compass only got, I think 21 miles per gallon, which actually, considering the cold temperatures and everything, it wasn't bad, but
should be better.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect better from a 2.4 liter. But aside from that, the rest of it it was really nice to drive. The seats are comfortable. Nice choice of materials inside. It was well executed, and everything worked well. And it's got the latest version of the Uconnect system in there, with support for Android Auto and CarPlay. So yeah, I mean, it was a good vehicle to have during some bad January weather.
Yeah, it's funny how terrible weather can really shift your opinion of a vehicle. Like you appreciate different things about it when you have it in those conditions, versus like, the sort of general fair weather that you'd assume.
Yeah, I mean, when you use a vehicle in kind of the environment that it's designed for, whatever flaws it might have in other respects kind of tend to fall away to some degree. And, not that the Compass actually has a lot of flaws. Like I said, overall, aside from the engine, I liked it a lot. And, hopefully one of the things that will get updated for 2019, for the 2019 model year is perhaps they'll add the new 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo that's in the Compass and the Wrangler as an option to this, or maybe a smaller displacement, 1.8 liter version or 1.6 liter version, because I think with an engine, a more modern engine like that, it would actually be a really competitive vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, it already is competitive, just
much more so though.
Yeah, yeah. Jeep is one of those brands that just doesn't. They're doing things very well.
Yeah.
they have hit their stride. Did it have the black roof? I was fascinated.
Yes, it did. So yeah, it was the two-tone. It was black over red.
It looks so good.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. I think it's a really cool look. Just a little, a real thin chrome strip around the side glass. And the new look on the front and on the rear. It was great. I was very pleased with it.
I was fascinated. I saw an episode of Autoline. I think it might have been Autoline After Hours. This was a few months ago. And they had someone from Jeep on, and he was talking about that black roof look, and the paint process for it is actually sort of it's wet on wet, which is something that requires a little bit of engineering know-how and paint shop finesse. So
what you're saying is we'll never see something like that from Tesla?
I would assume that a lot of the production refinements that we take for granted on mass market cars are going to be very difficult for Tesla to pull off, unless they stop their small batch craft production hubris methods.
Okay, enough Tesla bashing for now.
For now. All right. Yeah, I really liked the Compass as well. I think it's a fantastic update. The engine is a little bit uncouth, but they'll get to that. You know what?
Yeah.
They should make a Wankel.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and if you want something in this class that is also capable of some serious off-roading, if you want to go down some two tracks, the Trailhawk is an excellent choice as well. It's got Jeep's most advanced 4-wheel drive system with both locking front and rear axles.
Does it have a locking center differential as well?
Locking center diff as well.
Yeah.
And,
that will go anywhere.
Yeah, and you've got the hill descent control and everything. So basically, you just put it in this mode, and it'll basically just crawl down any hill or up any hill. All you have to do is just steer it, and it's just effortlessly goes through whatever you throw at it.
Yeah, and that works really well, and Jeep knows its niche. They make good stuff.
Yeah, you can get this thing up on 2 wheels, and 2 diagonally opposed wheels, and it just keeps on going.
Yeah, and so that would actually be deadly for a lot of other vehicles that have open differentials. So an open differential,
they would just get stuck. They wouldn't be going anywhere.
The thing with an open differential that most people don't realize is it's actually kind of one-wheel drive. The wheel with the least traction gets the most torque, which there's no way around it. I guess now the way around it is brake-based traction control. So technology has made that part of life a little better, but still at a certain point you just get stuck.
Yeah.
Until you can lock them. I love in the winter when I have the chance to put the Jeep in 4 low and lock everything up. Man, I feel like I could just climb the side of the house.
You probably could.
Super entertaining.
As long as you had tires with sufficient traction, because ultimately it does come down to the tires. You can have all the fancy hardware in the world in the chassis, but if your tires can't get a grip on whatever surface you happen to be rolling across, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But ultimately, F still equals mu n.
All right. I'm gonna let that one stand. All right. So this week I actually had quite a big surprise. So they dropped.
You had a crossover too, right?
I did. They dropped off a Toyota CHR. Have you had a chance to drive one?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'll probably be scheduling one in the next couple of months.
So my first impression was like, boy, that's a whole lot of styling on a tiny little car. And it is. It's possibly an acquired taste. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit over the top for a Toyota, and that's part of what Toyota is trying to do. I think is put a little bit more life, a little bit more spark into its brand. And having just spent some time in the Corolla, I expected to be very underwhelmed because the CHRs, it definitely wears its heart on its sleeve. It looks like it wants to be taken seriously, and I've been let down in that sense by Toyotas in the past. They're good at being Toyotas, and they're not great at being BMWs. I was really, really shocked by the CHR. It's fantastic to drive.
Really? Because I've heard some negative opinions of its driving.
What have you heard about its driving?
Mostly that it just felt kind of sloppy and wasn't very responsive.
So it has a CVT. I think it's CVT only.
It is.
That hurts its powertrain responsiveness, and even when you put it in manual mode or sport mode, that part of it's not great. It's got a 2-liter 4-cylinder. It's probably okay, but again, you put it together with the CVT and that combo, it's okay. But the chassis tuning is really, really good, and the platform it's on the Toyota. It's TNGA, right? Toyota New Generation Architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It's every car I've driven with this platform has had some promise, and this is probably the best tuned TNGA car. So at least taken on its own, I'm not comparing it with anything. I'm not comparing it with a GTI, let's say, or anything like that. Taken on its own, it's pleasant to drive. It handles well. It rides with discipline. It locks onto center, which is a consistent issue I have with Toyotas. Is that they tend to need a lot of small steering corrections for whatever reason. The way they align them or their front suspension geometry is just a way like they're annoying because you got to constantly keep tweaking the wheel back and forth. Not the CHR. and the steering actually feels really good. It's electrically assisted. I think they have the motor on the column, so that has the potential to not be good. It's pretty good here. It's not like super feedback, but it's good. And one of the things that this platform offers is a pretty solid mounting for the steering rack, which I think is one of the reasons why I like driving TNGA cars. So it's, it got me curious enough to look into like, okay, what did they do with this car that made it feel this way? Because it feels really good for what I was expecting. They tuned it on the Nürburgring. It's got a very large rear sway bar. I think it's like 26 millimeters. So that's about an inch. It's a little more than an inch, 1 millimeter more than an inch. So that's a lot of roll stiffness in the rear axle for something that probably weighs about 3,100 pounds. That's good. Discipline wise, that's good. So I was shocked. I was very surprised. It definitely it's carrying a heavy load of styling on it for sure, and it's not space efficient, but it's entertaining. I was surprised.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about the CHR in North America, at least, is that it's not available with all-wheel drive.
Right, and that's the other thing that surprised me.
Yeah, it's front wheel drive only here. Other parts of the world you can get it in all wheel drive, but not here.
I think all wheel drive might dull some of the sensation just because of the weight and the sort of the powertrain, the way it would sap any kind of responsiveness or has the potential to. And honestly, like it doesn't need front wheel drive. I mean, if all wheel drive, it certainly needs winter tires in a winter environment, but it like. That's for so many cars that actually come with all-wheel drive. It's not the most practical thing, but it's a lot of expressiveness for a Toyota. And when you see them actually walking the walk that they talked about, this is one of the goals, right, of Akio Toyoda is to put that spark back in the brand. He's a car enthusiast, and he freely admitted, hey, our cars need a little more passion. If this is indicative of it, it's moving in a positive direction. It's kind of useless as a crossover, even though it's ostensibly a crossover, just because it's kind of tiny.
So is the Chevy Bolt ostensibly.
Right. But I think the Bolt might actually be a little more useful because it's kind of carved out a little bit space wise. And I feel like the CHR is actually so I had an XLE Premium. That gets a little pricey. So it's stickered at 28. The XLE starts at like 24, 350, something like that. And I had a couple of packages. So there was like the premium package. It has a special color. A few things to boost the price. And 28 for this, that's really competitive territory. There's a lot of other vehicles that have a lot of charm right in that price range. I mean, honestly, if you want something overstyled that's entertaining to drive, you can get a Mini.
Yeah.
For 28. It might not be quite as well equipped, but I mean, Toyota infotainment sucks. Still. Does
the CHR have, it doesn't have the new Entune 3 system in it, does it?
No, this one has the 7-inch, they're calling it display audio. That's not a good system. They're phasing that one out now as they started with the Camry last year, and now the new Avalon that they just launched in Detroit, replacing it with a brand new system. It's been completely redesigned. It's the old system was based on technology from Nuance. The new one is actually running on automotive grade Linux. And in many ways it's vastly superior to the old one. Oh, they finally put Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. CarPlay. That's the Avalon.
Right? CarPlay only. No Android Auto for now.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, and when they introduced Entune 3 last year, one of the things they added in there was Smart Device Link, which is the open source version of Sync App Link. Yeah. And I asked the Toyota engineers at the time, said, "Are you going to also add CarPlay and Android Auto support?" Because Ford supports it on theirs. And they said, no, we have no plans to do that. So, at that time, they had no plans to do, either of them. And now they've launched CarPlay in the Avalon. So maybe they'll still do Android Auto at some point, but who knows?
Yeah. The consistent complaint I have about the Toyota system is just, it's just crappy to use.
Yeah.
So hopefully the new version of Entune is better. And the screens here are too bright. There's no way to dim the screens as much as I need to. And there's a screen in between the gauges that I also can't get dim enough.
No.
I know it's kind of an individual component.
Just gotta start wearing your sunglasses at night.
Yeah. So the film and video geek in me goes, I wish I had some neutral density that I could just cut and just, neutral density is this great gel and you just put it over lights and it knocks them down by a certain amount of intensity. So I just wanted to ND the whole interior. And the neatest thing I thought was looking at the sticker. This is probably the first car I have driven that was assembled in Turkey.
Really? Turkey?
Yeah. It's final assembly.
Well, actually,
Turkey.
Did you ever drive the first generation Transit Connect?
Oh, yes, I did. And that
Those
was
were
also
made in
from
Turkey too.
That's right. And they shipped them over like with full interiors and then took the interiors out.
To beat the chicken tax, yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of those oddball things. Yeah, they shipped over passenger versions. All the ones they shipped over were passenger versions. So they had the window doors on the on the sides, and they had seats. Two rows of seats. And as soon as they landed in port, and cleared customs, they would send them to a modification shop and pull out the seats, gut the interiors, take out the windows, put in steel panels in place of the windows, and then basically throw all those parts away.
That's efficient.
It's
cheaper than the tax.
Cheaper than paying the 25% import tax.
Right. This car certainly smelled better than the first generation Transit Connect, which had a unique aroma about it. But I liked that vehicle. It was charming in its own way. And this one, apparently Turkish cars are charming. So yeah. All right, let's move on to the auto show, because that's where you were, and it seems like Ford stole a bunch of thunder by having a presser on Sunday, and then the next day it was. This was definitely a truck show. Yeah.
So actually, things really got kicked off on Saturday night. So Chevrolet did not actually have a press conference at the show proper this year. They had their press conference on. On Saturday night. They had a reception and the reveal of the 2019 Silverado, which they actually showed at a customer event in Texas in December. But all they did was show one version of it. They didn't give any details of it, and so they gave us a lot more detail this time. And then Sunday afternoon, we had the Ford press conference where they publicly unveiled the new North American market Ranger. And then on Monday morning, things got kicked off with the Ram press conference where they showed off the all-new 2019 Ram 1500. So this, the highlights of this show were really all about pickup trucks, because pickup trucks are the cash cow that keep the American auto industry running. And it's the profits from selling 900,000 F series trucks a year that are what's paying for all the promises that the car makers made last week at CES about automated and electric vehicles. Because without all the profits from those trucks coming in, they probably wouldn't be able to afford to fund the development of all that other technology that's coming down the road.
Yeah, where the hell was my mid-engine Corvette? They've been talking about that, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, there was lots of rumors about that, and there's two potential scenarios. One, the mid-engine Corvette and all these spy photos we've been seeing of it are the most elaborate troll in history against Don Sherman by General Motors. Don
You know what? I think like no guy deserves it more. And I've never met Don, but just what I know about Don, nobody deserves it more.
Don is the technical editor at Car and Driver. And so, he's been going on about mid-engine Corvettes for
since 1968.
25, 30 years at least. Yeah. Well, at least, in print, he's been doing it. He probably was born, dreaming of mid-engine Corvettes. And I like Don. I mean, I've known Don for a long time. But that's been his bailiwick. If you're somebody who follows Apple technology analysts, you may have heard the name Gene Munster over the years. For years and years, Gene Munster was always proclaiming that Apple was about to release a TV. Like an actual TV screen. And of course, it never happened. And, Don is the Gene Munster of the mid-engine Corvette. So the other possibility, and, I was chatting with somebody from GM the other day at the show, and I said, so tell me, is the mid-engine vet just this elaborate troll of Don? Is it real? Are the spy photos we're seeing just some tube frame kit car with a fiberglass body and some camo on it? Basically running a 4-cylinder engine.
That would be so worth it.
And he just smiled and laughed. But the other more likely possibility actually is rather than showing it here in Detroit. Because the reason to build a mid-engine Corvette would be to provide the basis for a race car, much as the reason Ford built the GT was to go racing at Le Mans. For years, for the last almost 20 years now, GM's been racing the Corvettes in Le Mans and IMSA, and more recently, they've been battling hard against the Ford GTs and some of the other newer mid-engine cars from Ferrari and Porsche. So building a mid-engine Corvette would give them potentially give them a more competitive platform. So the 24 Hours of Daytona is coming up next weekend. That's another possible venue where they might reveal it. Or the other, what may actually be the most likely venue, is in June at Le Mans in France.
Okay. All right. So it's not necessarily one of those things like told you it's not happening.
Yeah.
It may still happen.
Well, I think it's pretty clear at this point. We've seen enough spy photos that it's almost certain that there is one. I mean, I joke about trolling Don, and that's certainly a possibility. But I suspect that I don't think GM would waste their time and energy doing that. Not to this degree.
Not new GM. Yeah, no. Yeah. It needs to be a little bit more fiscally conservative.
Right. So they're it'll probably come either next week at Daytona, and if not, then in June at Le Mans.
Okay, so we can still keep an eye out for it, and it may happen. And in the meantime, you were saying before we started, like, the show was actually, and Detroit's sort of the flagship U.S. show, but this year it seemed like a little bit of a letdown.
A bit, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of manufacturers that didn't even have stands at the show this year. Volvo, who won the North American Utility of the Year, they were not there. Mazda, Mitsubishi, Jaguar Land Rover, Porsche, all absent from the show floor.
No, Mitsubishi had a stand. Well, they had three cars.
Out in the lobby, local Mitsubishi dealers brought 3 vehicles and parked them out there.
Oh, okay.
And actually, similarly, the local Detroit area Volvo dealers also brought 4 cars and parked them in the lobby, but no official show stand. Russell Datz, Volvo's national PR manager, was on hand to accept his awards for the company, but no other official presence from Volvo at the show this year. So yeah, I mean, the press conference schedule was a little light. A surprising amount of empty space on the show floor this year. And so I suspect the organizers will be making some further schedule adjustments next year. Maybe going back to 2 days or maybe even one day of all the manufacturer press conferences, because there's not really a whole lot of justification for spreading it out to 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, what does that portend? Is it just they've expanded the show too much, or the show used to be able to support that kind of expansion, and now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Part of it is just in general, automakers are less inclined to do big reveals at auto shows for a couple of reasons. One, it's extremely expensive. I mean, it costs a lot of money to build a show stand and do all the stuff to do an event at the auto show versus doing a standalone event somewhere else. And then, secondarily, part of it was, kind of the product cadence. I mean, there's right now a lot of the manufacturers, are kind of, they're, in a bit of a lull between announcements. So what we saw, this week is, what there is that's ready right now. And, we'll see more stuff later in the spring and in the fall. But right now, that's kind of all there is. But on the other hand, what we did see, there was actually some pretty interesting stuff in there. Like, I joked about the trucks being what pays for all the autonomous and electric vehicle research. But, those trucks, there's a lot of technology going into those things. Like the Silverado, GM, made some hay, I think last year or the year before, with some ads that they ran, poking holes at the Ford F-150, literally. When they, took a front end loader and dumped a bunch of cinder blocks into the bed of an F-150, and tore a hole in the aluminum bed. And they did the same thing with a Silverado, and it was unscathed. And so they made some noise at their press conference, revealing the Silverado. They took 450 pounds out of that thing, and it still has a steel bed. All of the fixed panels are still steel, and only what they referred to as the swing panels, the doors, the hood, the tailgate, are aluminum. Everything else is still, various grades of steel and high strength steels, but they still managed to take a lot of weight out of that thing. And, because the previous generation F-150 was actually the heaviest of all of the three major pickup trucks.
Yeah, I was going to say the GM trucks probably started off a lot lighter anyway.
Yeah, they did. So, with the 450 pounds they took out of this thing, it may well end up being pretty close to even with the aluminum F-150. They've, some of the other features they added in there. They've got the new 10-speed transmission. They announced 3 different engines for now. There's going to be 6 powertrains in total, but right now they've only announced 3: the 5.3 liter V8, 6.2 liter V8, and an all new 3 liter diesel. Which will be the first diesel in the light duty pickups. But unlike the Ford and Chrysler diesels, this one is an inline 6, not a V6.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Is that something that they just had sort of kicking around somewhere? Or did they decide to engineer an inline 6 from the ground up? And
it's an all new engine. I asked Dan Nicholson, the VP of Powertrain Development or Propulsion Systems at GM, about that, and he said, "No, it doesn't share any of its dimensions." Because that first thought, maybe it shares some of its architecture with the 2.8 liter 4-cylinder diesel that's in the Canyon in Colorado. Yeah, but it's not. It's different bore spacing and everything. So it's a completely unique engine. And the reason why they opted for an inline 6 is, in the trucks, they had enough room to do an inline 6, in terms of packaging it. And they decided, that the NVH characteristics, the noise, vibration, and harshness, were so much better with the inline 6 compared to a V6 that they opted to go that direction. So it's going to be a much smoother, quieter engine than the V6 engines in the Ford and Ram pickups.
Well, those are good reasons. And I will say that their V8 diesel is pretty impressively refined. That's a quiet, smooth engine. You'd hardly know that's a diesel,
right? And
that's the V8. So if they're starting off with an inline 6, which is has good manners,
yeah.
It astounds me because it's a long engine. Although I guess you can get kind of clever with the packaging and shorten it down quite a bit. And 3 liters that's not We're not talking about the old Cummins.
with modern engine design, and like you say, 3 liters is not a huge engine, and with modern engine design, they can actually close up the bore spacing quite a bit, and make the engine surprisingly compact for an inline 6. So I'll be curious to see that when it comes out late this year. And then the other thing that they've added on the 2 V8s is they've got the first application of dynamic skip fire, which is a technology. We last year, after CES, we ran an interview that I did with Jim Zizelman of Delphi, and I'll include a link in the show notes to that one, where he talked about the dynamic skip fire. But basically, it's a technology developed by a company called Tula out of California that allows them to randomly shut off up to 7 cylinders. So basically, they can take it down to a single cylinder, and they can shut off engines for as little as a single crank rotation or a single power cycle, so 2 crank rotations, and it, rather than always shutting off the same cylinders, it's constantly shifting around which ones. Going through them in a random order that helps the engine run smoother. And I haven't tried it in a V8 yet, but I did get a chance to test drive a 4-cylinder, a VW Passat with the same technology on a 4-cylinder engine last summer. And it was remarkably seamless. I mean, you would never guess that that it was running on a single cylinder and going back and forth to 2, 3, or 4 cylinders dynamically, depending on the load on the engine.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting in terms of how it's accepted in the marketplace. I mean, I think we've seen with the MDS and whatever, I forget what Chevy displacement on demand is what it started off as.
Active fuel management is what they call it. And actually, the branding that Chevy's using for this, I mean, Delphi and Tula call it dynamic skip fire. GM is actually calling it dynamic fuel management.
Okay. I mean, it seems like we've all kind of accepted that. All the old V8 6.4 jokes have kind of gone by the wayside, and it just seems like a technology that works, although there still were some issues with it. It's more stuff in the engine, but they're looking for those gains like you talked about. You always point out, like, especially in trucks, because the fuel economy is so inherently low even now, the gains, it's easier to get a larger percentage gain, where putting, and this is something
and doing the same percentage gain, when you're starting at 16 or 18 miles per gallon, going to 22, 23, gives you a much bigger savings in fuel consumption than going from 35 to 45.
Right.
Because of the way the math works, and I can include a link to an article I wrote, I don't know, 9-10 years ago on Autoblog Green that explains all that.
Yeah, I mean, I say right like I have some kind of authority. It's like whatever. But no, I mean, it makes sense. Like if they were to put this on something like a Bolt, not a Bolt, on something like a Sonic, it would work. And it would increase fuel economy, but it wouldn't look that impressive.
Yeah. So I mean, this I think has the ability to probably improve fuel efficiency by up to about 10%.
Yeah. So that's pretty good when you get 15.
Yeah.
10% of that's no joke. So.
Yeah. So that's Chevy, and we'll be hearing a lot more details about the other powertrains over the coming months. It's one of those, they talk about it now, they'll launch it in the fall sometime, and between then and now and then, we'll be getting a continuous trickle of news about that. And then, Ford showed the Ranger, and what was interesting is when they dropped the Ranger from North America like 5 or 6 years ago, they said, the reason why they discontinued it, and why they didn't bring the global Ranger here at the time, they said, well, it's too close. It would cost us almost as much to build the Ranger as it does to build an F-150, and the difference in fuel economy is not going to be that big. So it wouldn't be worth it for customers.
I think that's all of that is still true. The difference is that people have proven that they will ignore all of those things and buy the mid-sized truck.
Well, there's also another really important difference too. the market for full size trucks has actually shifted dramatically towards premium versions of the trucks. So the average selling price of an F-150 now is $58,000.
That's stupid. That truck's not that good. I don't like the F-Series anyway.
But I mean, there's been similar trends for all of the truck brands. So everybody's buying premium versions. So 40% of F-150 sales now are like Lariat and Raptor and Limited and Platinum. So nearly half, which is that's crazy. But
none of those trucks are like. Look, if you're spending $50,000 on a pickup truck, it better be like ready to work.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess, who am I to cast stones?
Well,
if
that's
you
what
want a
you
luxury
do.
truck, get a luxury truck. You know what? Like, that's fine. It's just you.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So, the Ranger, will give them an option, at a lower price point. They can price it much lower than an F-150 and still make a profit on it. And
Well, see, that's my question. Can they? Because at a certain point, the truck is the truck. It's got a frame, it's got an engine, it's got axles, it's transmissions. Like, you can only shrink it so much. That like traditional ladder frame construction only gets so cheap, and then you're stuck.
Well, I mean, they're not using an aluminum body on it. It's still a steel body, so that'll save them some cost. It's a 4-cylinder engine only, at least to launch. At some point, I wouldn't be surprised to see them add either or both the diesel from the F-150, the 3-liter V6, and probably the hybrid powertrain that's going into the F-150 in 2020 as options in the Ranger and also the upcoming Bronco. But for now, it's only the 2.3-liter EcoBoost that's in the Mustang is the only powertrain option, and then crew cab and extended cab versions, just like with the GM, the Chevy Colorado and GMC Canyon.
So the one thing that you said that I think I forgot about for a little while, Bronco. That's probably going to be where this particular set of parts makes most of its profit.
Yep, almost certainly.
Yeah, and I think the truck will be fine. It'll be what it is. It'll be great. But for me, there's that issue where I'll drive something like a Colorado or a Canyon. I'm like, yeah, it's a nice truck, but for the money you pay, usually you're better off, and you can usually find actually a better deal on one of the full-size pickups that will give you a little bit more room. Sometimes you trade off some options and some trim level stuff, but at the end of the day, you get a larger truck. Some people don't want a larger truck. So, okay, I'm glad that they're here, but economically, I have a really hard time seeing that they're going to make a huge financial gain from this. Although I will say truck profits must be fat.
Oh yeah,
for them to be able to do this.
Oh yeah.
Especially
when you're selling, like F-450 limiteds, for $100,000.
Yeah, and I will say when we get those as press vehicles, they're delightful. Please send us nice trucks,
as long as you can fit it in your driveway.
My drive. Well, and that's the other issue with the mid-sized trucks. They will fit in a garage if you have a condo or. Even some houses now, because, a lot of builders are throwing up a house and they're just using dimensional lumber. So, the house is only 24 feet deep and, the garages are tight and that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, a full size truck often will not fit in those, especially when they've added another 4 inches to the length as both GM and Ram did. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Ram, I really love the styling of the new Ram. I think they've done a great job keeping that truck fresh, and we finally get to see them shift away from the crosshair grille and that sort of that almost reminiscent of the forward look Chryslers. There was this point in time, and I guess it was around 2005 when they introduced the Charger and the 300, where they did this sort of stylistic shift to bring back the crosshair grille and the slanted front ends and stuff that made me think of at least the old forward look cars of the late 50s in a good way. Like, it looked good, but they've seemed to have moved the Ram beyond that now to something new.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Ram, has had the crosshair grille, since 93 or 94 when they introduced the T300 version, the first one that had the drop fender look, like the big, Class 8 truck look. And it's had the crosshair grille ever since then, because that was always a Dodge signature thing, but of course over the last 6 years or so, Ram was separated from Dodge and made its own brand. So a couple of years ago they started to shift the grill design, as they brought out special editions like the Limiteds and the Rebel and others. Those special edition models dispensed with the crosshair grill, and now for the 2019 that's been completely redesigned, the crosshair grill is gone entirely. But go ahead.
To good effect. Seeing spy shots, it wasn't quite clear how it was going to all come together. It almost looked like there was echoes of GM trucks in it and stuff. And talking about styling is probably about the most shallow thing we can do.
Yeah.
But it's an auto show, and so that's what
it's all about.
Yeah.
But so it's the drop fender look is more subtle now. It's still there's you can still see a little bit of it there, but it's not as dramatic as it has been in the past. But the really big news is actually under the hood of these things. So they're launching with the 3.6 liter Pentastar V6 and the 5.7 Hemi V8, and they're putting 48 volt mild hybrid systems on all of them. Right. It's going to be standard on all the V6s. So every V6 Ram is going to have a mild hybrid system on it, and it'll be optional on the V8s. But talking to the FCA powertrain folks, they're expecting that the only ones that won't get sold with the mild hybrid will be like the low end work truck versions that a lot of fleets buy. They'll probably take a pass on it, but they expect most retail customers will opt for the mild hybrid. And it's going to be, I'll be curious to see how it drives. I've driven a few smaller vehicles with mild hybrids, but this will be the first truck application of this technology. And it'll be interesting to see how much of a boost in fuel economy they can get. In general, most claims are that you can get about 10 to 15 miles or 10 to 15% improvement in fuel economy with this technology. And what it does is it allows you to using a 48 volt belted starter generator and a lithium ion battery. The auto stop start now can shut off the engine at about 3 or 4 miles an hour while the truck is still moving. And then, because the battery is larger, it can actually keep the engine off, usually through an entire, traffic signal cycle, and then get the vehicle launched again on battery power, and then start the engine up once it's already moving. Because a lot of people complain about the vibration when the engine restarts, but usually when you feel that vibration the most is if the engine restarts like in the middle of a traffic signal cycle, and your foot's still on the brake pedal, so then when that happens, you've got, that reaction force from the brakes, and that's what gives you the most vibration. If your foot's not on the pedal, most modern vehicles with auto stop start, you don't even feel it. And so now, because it can actually get the truck rolling and then restart it, that won't be a problem anymore. And then the other thing they can do on the V8s, because they have the cylinder deactivation, is, in the past, if you had even a little bit of throttle tip in, while you're driving, it would usually kick back from 4 to 8 cylinder control. But now with the mild hybrid, it can stay in 4-cylinder mode longer, and if you've got, if you're climbing a slight grade or, you get a little bit of tip in on the throttle, it can use the electric power to assist. And on the V6, that starter generator can add about 90 foot-pounds of torque. And on the one on the V8 is good for about 130 foot-pounds of torque.
I want an extra 90 foot-pounds of torque on my Pentastar. I would welcome that. That's going to be interesting to see, and I'm really curious to see how it feels, because, like you say, if you could get it rolling and I've noticed this. The stop start stuff is usually easier to take in a hybrid, because it's less obtrusive, and hybrids have the larger motors that start the engine as well, so they don't have a smaller like a traditional starter. So if they can smooth some of that stuff out, the truck's still going to feel really refined, and truck buyers are picky. So that's an important thing to get over. I was also shocked to see that Ram is poised to. Are they poised to take number 2, maybe off of or 3?
Probably 3 off of
truck sales.
Well, maybe. I mean, if you're going by brand as opposed to manufacturer,
right? From GMC,
I think they're already number 3 because I think GMC. I'm pretty sure they're ahead of GMC.
Okay,
but they're still way behind Chevrolet and Ford. But if you combine, if you go by manufacturer and you combine Chevrolet and GMC, then they're much closer to Ford.
Yeah, and that's always the sort of joke about the F-Series sort of best-selling numbers. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. Because I think what they quote is that the F-150 is the best-selling truck, and that's a little bit specious, given how
I think the F-150 still outsells the combined sales of Silverado and Sierra 1500s. So the light duty versions, it's still, I think it still outsells the other two combined. It may be close. It's a lot closer now than it used to be. But usually what they quote now is the total trucks that so the 1500s, the 2500s, and the 3500s combined. So all the Super Duties plus the F-150, and the same for the GM HD trucks along with their light duty trucks.
Okay, I'm just skeptical of numbers anymore.
Well, as well you should be. Never trust numbers.
Yeah, you know what? Let's move on from the truck news though, because Ford. With that Sunday press conference, they made a pretty big splash. They did a good job. They exhumed a 50-year-old movie for the third time, and they actually dug up the car. I was impressed that they found the hero car, and Haggerty did I think Larry Webster wrote it, a beautiful story about the owner of that movie hero car and where it's been. It was sort of like hiding in plain sight for 50 years. And that was really fascinating to read. And it was all nicely coordinated on Sunday with the press conference and the release of the 2019 Bullitt, which is, regardless of whether or not you know what the hell Bullitt is, because I've had to explain that to people too. It's a 50-year-old movie. It's not like
and to be honest, aside from the chase scene, it's actually not a great movie.
Well, see, I'll have to go back and watch it.
I watched it again recently.
Audiences now are different too, though, right? Like, I don't know.
I mean, the chase, the chase between Steve McQueen's character driving the Mustang and the bad guys in a black Dodge Charger is spectacular. I mean, nothing like that had ever been done before Bullitt, and it's truly amazing to watch, especially, I mean, it's amazing to watch it now, regardless of when it was made. But, if you look at it in the context of 1968, and what was being done then, it's even more remarkable that they were able to create that chase scene.
Yeah. Well, and that chase scene almost didn't make it. There was, and that's why it won the Oscar, even with the continuity errors. It won the Oscar for Best Editing because of the clever way it was put together with overlapping action to save. And there's an explosion like right at the end, if I recall. Not if the Charger explodes, but there was something else that happened, and it went off too early, and it almost sunk that whole scene. And the editor cleverly used sort of overlapping action and juxtaposition to pull it off successfully. And so. Hooray for us editors.
Yeah. And one of the two Mustangs that was used in the filming of the movie the one that was primarily driven by Steve McQueen in the movie, ended up disappearing somewhere afterwards, for the better part of 50 years. Well, actually, it was known where it was in the 1970s, and in 1977, McQueen actually did try to buy it back, but the owners were unwilling to sell it, and so then it kind of disappeared for pretty much the next 40 years, and was only rediscovered relatively recently.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating story. I think people should go read the Haggerty thing. Well, you know what? I'll make a note to put a link in there.
Yeah,
because that was a really nice article, and it explains sort of just the family significance and the reasoning for not selling. All of that stuff, regardless of all of that, it's just a nice spec of the Mustang.
Yeah,
it looks. I love the Highland green, and I'm not fully sold on the dark wheels, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they look better in person. I mean, I think I probably would have preferred something that looked more like the originals, like they did on the last Bullitt 10 years ago. But the rest of the car, is damn near perfect. The color is fantastic. The debadging as they've done with all the previous Bullets. So no pony, just the Bullitt badge on the trunk lid, and nothing else on it. And it just it looks fantastic. And then mechanically, I was talking with Carl Widman, who's the chief engineer on Mustang now, and what they've done for this one, for the Bullitt, is they put the GT350 intake manifold onto the 5-liter, along with a larger throttle body. And then they also did some tweaks to the exhaust system to make it sound even better. And so it's going to have at least 475 horsepower, probably a little bit more than that when it comes out later this summer as a 2019 model. And they're not talking price or volumes yet. Last time I think they did 8,000 or 9,000 a year for a 2-year model run.
And what did they cost? What's your speculation?
Well, Mustang GTs start about 35 or 36 now. Based on the equipment that's in this one. It's got the Recaro seats and everything. I'm guessing it's probably going to be in the mid 40s. So
that's cheaper than I thought. I thought it might be like 55.
I don't think they'll go over 50 because then you're going to start to be encroaching on the GT350. So I think probably somewhere between 45 and 50. 50 I think is going to be the top end. I don't think they'll go over 50 with this one.
And then dealer market adjustments.
Yeah. Well, yeah, then there is that. Unfortunately, that's such is the nature of capitalism and the U.S. Automotive retail system. Yeah,
but I wonder if this is the last gasp for the Bullitt. And I'm finishing up a piece for Forbes because I'm a couple days behind, but just sort of positing that, like, I've had to explain what Bullitt is to people already. Does it lose its cultural significance? And it's kind of okay if it does, because it's still just a good car. But it's not like we make what's that? I'm trying to look for it. It's not like we make Gone with the Wind, carriages. I don't know if that really works.
Actually, I think there probably are some out there. But, I mean, there's all kinds of other Gone with the Wind merchandise. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're carriages.
Well, damn it. Casablanca gin. No, I know that exists. But I mean, you get the point.
No, it's a valid question. I mean, at this point, how many people, how many younger people even know who Steve McQueen is, and how many of them know the movie Bullitt? And
I think a lot of younger people actually do know who Steve McQueen is. His career has seen this renaissance, especially among enthusiasts. They lionize the guy. Le Mans is a very popular movie.
Also,
a hot mess.
Visually stunning. Not so much of a great movie.
Yeah, and so, and here's my complicated problem with Steve McQueen is that, like, I don't think he was a real he wasn't a great person.
He was a deeply flawed individual.
Yeah, and he was a person. He was a human. So I'm not gonna go into detail, but just he had a tough
good biography of him if you're interested.
Yeah. He had a real tough life, but I have trouble with holding any media figure up too high. So please, whoever holds me up as a hero, don't do that. I'm a deeply flawed.
Dan is not a hero.
I would like to eat a hero. Nice, sandwich. But no, and I'm finding actually that this is as I learn more about, people and their backstory, things that I really once held in high esteem, I hold in less high esteem. So, and that's not saying that, Steve McQueen didn't do great work, because he did.
In The Great Escape and Papillon, and some of the movies he was in were really fantastic.
Yeah, I don't see the need to hold him up as an idol. He was a dude who definitely enjoyed cars and motorcycles and adrenaline, and no qualms with any of that. Just be good.
Don't hold up any human being as an idol. Yeah. Respect the work they do if they do good work, but we're all just humans, and treat us as such.
Yeah. All right. Moving on from our philosophy minute. I actually didn't look much. Oh, you know what? The Mach 1. The Mach 1 EV.
So after Jim Farley announced the Bullitt, and actually it was Molly McQueen, Steve's granddaughter, who actually really introduced it. She came out and told a story about her grandfather and introduced the car. But then Jim Farley came back out, and they talked about Ford expanding its investment in electrified vehicles from $4.5 billion to $11 billion, and then they ran this little video that they showed a Mustang and an Explorer heading into Detroit, into this building in Corktown in Detroit called the Factory, where the autonomous and EV teams are moving in the next couple of months. They made this announcement in December, and they showed the cars driving into the factory and all kinds of lightning and everything, and then it flashed up the Mach 1 badge on there, which was a badge used on Mustangs, primarily in the late 1960s, early 70s. And then it was later revived around 2000, 2001, I think. And then Farley came out and said that there's going to be a high-performance EV coming in 2020. And it's going to be a Mach 1.
Right, and so we naturally assumed that means, Mustang Mach 1, but that is not necessarily the case.
Yeah, it may very well be a crossover, which personally I think would be absolutely sacrilege.
Really?
You know what? I have no issue with Ford building a high performance electric crossover. Go for it. Just don't call it a Mach 1.
Yeah, I mean
a Mach 1 is a Mustang.
Sure.
Retire the badge.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to build a high performance electric Mustang, great. Call it a Mach 1. If it's anything else, don't use that badge.
Okay, I can get down with that. And actually, I was going to say, one of the other sacrileges would be to remake Bullitt. Don't do that either.
Yes, please. Actually, don't remake any movie.
Come up with some
ideas.
new ideas. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of to tie it back. Those names are well known. Mach 1 still has some cachet.
Mm-hmm.
So to say, well, it's a name we own, it's territory we own. People associate the Mach 1 with performance and Ford. So there's equity there. Let's consider using that equity. Yeah, and they actually said, hey guys, okay, we understand your reaction. It's not a done deal. We're thinking about it, which says to me that part of this move was to actually test reaction to the Mach 1 name for something other than a Mustang. And so maybe they got what they wanted out of it.
Yeah.
They realized it might not fly. So they're going to call it Probe instead. Because nobody likes that name. I'll be curious to see what it is too. Whether it's, dedicated platform or whether it is just like an electrified Explorer, which I would be horrified by.
Yeah. Let's not even think about that for now.
Okay. Well, let's move on then.
Yeah. So, something else that Ford introduced among the many things they talked about on Sunday was the Ford Edge ST, which actually, I guess they actually announced it before the show, but they showed it at the show, which is a slightly higher performance version of the Edge, slightly higher performance than the now retired Edge Sport, which had a 315 horsepower twin turbo 2.7 liter V6. That engine is now bumped up to 335 horsepower for 2019. It's got some braking upgrades and other stuff, which I had a chance to sit down with Jamal Hamidi, the chief engineer for Ford Performance, and talk about a little bit about his background and his history, at Ford, and what is when they're developing vehicles under the Ford Performance banner, and the Bullitt is actually not a Ford Performance brand model. It's coming from the main Mustang team. So Ford Performance right now includes the ST, the RS cars, and the Shelbys, the GT350, and the GT500, which is coming up, as well as the Ford GT. And so Jamal and I talked for about 10 minutes about how they came to create the Edge ST. So why don't we run that one right now? So, Jamal, I think I first met you just about 10 years ago at the preview of the GT500 KR in Dearborn, before you guys showed that off at the New York Auto Show. Yeah, so it's been about 10 years.
Been doing this for a while.
Yeah. So when did you start with Ford? How long have you been with Ford?
I started in 1991.
Okay.
Straight out of school.
And what kind of stuff did you work on before you moved over to SVT?
So I was a powertrain calibration guy. And then, so powertrain calibrators kind of tune the electronic systems for engine and transmissions. And then I kind of went upstream to be the strategy guy. So now you develop the control systems. You're actually writing the software. And then did that and did some attribute stuff. And then also during that whole time, I did kind of a nights and weekends job of a trophy truck race engineer. That we used to give a powertrain, like engine trans, harnesses, data logging, to a Baja trophy truck team.
Okay.
So I did that for 8 years too.
And when did you get involved with SVT, which is the precursor to what we now know as Ford Performance?
Well, actually, the last Ford GT that we did, so that started in 2002, and they were looking for people with racing backgrounds. So they were like, "Hey, this guy, he does, all this trophy trucks." So that was how I got my job as a program manager for the last Ford GT.
Okay.
For Gen 2 Ford GT.
And it was 2014, I think. Ford merged Team RS in Europe and SVT and Ford Racing into Ford Performance.
Ford Performance, right.
And so you are the chief engineer for chief. So it's still chief nameplate engineer, or just chief engineer?
Just chief engineer, yeah.
Okay. And kind of tell me a little bit about what do you see as the overall vision from a performance perspective for Ford Performance and the vehicles that your team creates versus what is in the mainstream lineup. So whether that things like the Mustang GT or the Fusion Sport or any other more sportier vehicle in the mainstream lineup. How do you see Ford Performance as being distinct from that?
Well, it's most of our products are taking an existing platform, an existing nameplate, and expanding its capability in some way. Some are track focused, some are drag strip focused, some are off-road focused, but it's always an expansion of the product's capability as well as a lot of times the aesthetics that go hand in hand with that. So it's just like taking an existing car and kind of turning the volume up on it.
Yeah, and over the years, between SVT and Team RS and now Ford Performance, there's been quite an array of different kinds of vehicles that have gone through there. I mean, everything from the various Mustangs over the years to the Focus SVT. There was a Contour SVT at one point.
Right.
The Raptor, which is obviously very different from a GT or any of the other models. And now the newest product is the Edge ST. And this is the first utility from Ford Performance. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
And kind of how did you approach this? And was there anything different in the way you approached this vehicle versus what Ford Performance has done before?
Well, I mean, so one thing that I take a lot of personal pride in, and it really sets Ford Performance apart from any other performance group in the world, is the breadth of what we do. There's no other performance organization in the world that goes from a B and C sized hot hatches to an off-road pickup truck to a rear-wheel drive V8 car to a carbon fiber supercar. No one else does that. And so, what that does is it gives us a lot of confidence that, there's a lot of areas that we can go into and execute very well. We had a lot of confidence that, we shouldn't limit the ST badge to just SUVs, but I was actually, to be completely honest with you, I was quite skeptical at first. And we went through a drive where we basically rented every performance SUV out there. Nearly all of them, are premium brand SUVs. And went out west and took them on very challenging roads, spent a lot of time on them, and spent a lot of time in them. And of those 10 SUVs that we rented, there was one that was quite fun to drive.
Only one was
only one that you wanted to. You didn't feel like you were flogging it on a mountain road, and you didn't feel like there was too much engine for not enough brake or chassis. But there was one, and it wasn't the fastest one, but it was the most fun to drive.
Yeah.
And everyone else, you were kind of going through the motions, but that one, you actually had fun and you enjoyed yourself. And that's what, to me personally, kind of hit home. Yeah, this works. We can do this.
And was that? I mean, there's a number of different sizes of vehicles in that class of some of these performance SUVs, and I think people can figure out probably which brands were. But was it a smaller one or one of the larger ones? Or I mean, were you looking at all primarily at vehicles in roughly the same size class as the Edge, or okay?
It was the whole gamut.
Yeah. So was it a smaller vehicle, or I mean, what was it? You said it wasn't the fastest, but
it wasn't the smallest. It wasn't the biggest.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you which one it was.
All right. That's fine. So when you tackled the Edge, I mean, what areas in particular did you really focus on, to make it earn that ST badge?
Well, again, first and foremost, it has to be super fun to drive. Even more important than 0 to 60 or lap times, which doesn't really translate to an SUV. But it has to be fun to drive, and when you put it on a twisty, challenging road, everything has to work in balance between the engine, the transmission. You can't always be waiting for it to shift, and the handling, and really the most important thing, especially to me in a SUV, are the brakes, because you're kind of at a higher CG. You actually have a great commanding view, which is even better than a normal sedan. But to me, that's the most important thing, is that the brakes really have to
So you upgraded the brakes for the ST?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you've got, I guess there's a standard brake package and there's an upgraded brake package as well.
Right.
Is that,
yeah.
Is the standard brake packages, are those sliding calipers or are they also?
They're all sliding calipers.
Okay, so the upgrade is also sliding caliper? Okay.
Which, if you size a sliding caliper properly with the rotor setup, you can get there.
Okay. And what about the powertrain? I guess you've got the new 8-speed, which is new for this year on the Edge, and I guess a couple of other models, the Nautilus and others. Did you do special calibrations on the
engine trans calibration is unique?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the engine, we've already seen the 2.7 liter EcoBoost in a couple of other applications. Is it just is there any hardware changes or just calibration changes to what you did?
It's primarily tuning.
Okay.
Which is similar to what we do on like a Fiesta ST or a Focus ST.
Okay. And
EcoBoost engines are so great like that because they're so flexible, and you can make with just calibration, you can go from something that is more befitting a luxury car to something all the way to like an RS, or even a GT. Certainly, GT has a lot of hardware changes, but like RS engine, which with mostly just tuning.
Okay, and certainly, you've got everything from variable valve timing to the turbos that you can work with and fuel delivery that you can get a lot out of it.
Wastegate control, DI, PFI.
Okay, so what would for you personally? What would you like to tackle next? What sort of vehicle would you like to? Is there something you haven't done that you'd like to try?
There is, but I can't tell you what that is either.
Does that mean it's something that will be coming sometime soon?
If I do my job correctly, it will.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jamal.
Yeah, thanks.
Great to talk to you as always.
Okay. Well, thank you for grabbing that interview with Jamal. I'm still going to send him an email demanding a manual transmission in my crossover. And also in the list we had the Lexus LF1 Limitless, which is a dopey name, and it's a kind of a weird looking thing.
It looks a lot better in person than it does in photos. I
was watching from the Twitter mostly, and it seemed like, man, people just did not like styling this year. The other, maybe it was just Toyota styling. This Lexus got a lot of crap for its grill, which I think it's an interesting grill. It looks like it might harm you. But the other car that took a bunch of crap was the Avalon, and I was like, yeah, it's an Avalon, guys. But it has also a large grill treatment. But yeah, what interested you about the LF1, the Lexus?
I like the way it looks, including the grill.
Okay.
And that gold color they had on it, it looks really cool. And unlike, the RX, which has been, Lexus's perennial bestseller.
Yeah, I do not like the way that looks.
Yeah.
It's just a dull car.
The RX, or the LF1, is actually built on a rear drive platform. It's shared, it's built on the platform of the LS and LC. So it's a rear drive platform, and when you look at it in profile, it's got the long hood proportions. It looks more like a performance vehicle, I think this thing could be really interesting.
Well, are they looking to establish a crossover that does almost work like an LC for them in the crossover realm, just to have that kind of panache?
I think that is the case because they've got a bunch of other utilities. They've got the compact NX, they've got the RX, and then they've got the big body on frame, GX and LX models. So I think this. Ultimately, I think this is actually going to slot into the lineup as a replacement for the GS sedan, which has always been a surprisingly slow seller, and it's when at some point in the next year or so, if it's not already, that one's going to fade away from the lineup, and instead of replacing it with yet another GS sedan, I think they're going to use the LF1, or a production version of the LF1 as the replacement for that, and offer a high performance utility vehicle.
You know what? That's a smart move.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever you may think of the idea of high performance utility vehicles, the market seems to like them.
Can we just yes, we can just point over to the Mercedes stand and then their absurd G-Wagon thing. Where was that? It was the Michigan.
It was at the Michigan Theater in Detroit. Yeah, that was quite the performance.
Yeah. I love the G-Wagon and I hate the G-Wagon because it's used as a minivan by all of the very wealthy families around here. And it's so absurd. You have a turbo V8 and fully locking axles and a locking center differential, legit four-wheel drive.
You have a vehicle that has the off-road capabilities of a Wrangler.
Right. It was designed for the Iranian military.
Yeah.
I mean, that was its first customer. Was either Iranian or Israeli? Maybe
no.
Israeli.
It was the Iranian army.
Was it? Okay.
The Shah had ordered these things from Mercedes, and Mercedes worked with Steyr Puck.
Right?
Yeah,
Puck. I can't pronounce German.
To develop it, and by the time it was done, the Shah had been deposed. So suddenly they had no customer for it. And then when the Argentinians got into a little spat with the British over some tiny little islands in the middle of the South Pacific or South Atlantic, they decided, we probably shouldn't be driving the Land Rovers anymore, and so they swapped them for
so let's drive Mercedes.
Swapped them for G-Wagons instead.
Jesus. Well, and apparently when there was divided Germany, East Germany, West Germany, they were used as military vehicles there too. So
yeah, but that wasn't until later.
Yeah. Yes, just to get back, I forget what point I was making. Luxury performance utilities. People will buy them no matter how absurd, and the G-Wagon is definitely absurd. And the problem with the Lexus GS is that it's too big and it's too small. It's right in between the LS and which it's not that much smaller than the LS, but it's also not that much bigger. It's significantly bigger than the IS, but it's not small enough to play as well as the IS. I guess I'm making a very crappy point about making my point, but you see what I'm saying? It's the odd man out. I can see why it doesn't sell, because it's just like, why wouldn't you just get the LS? Or if you wanted something smaller, why wouldn't you just get the IS?
Yeah, I agree. But given all that, customers are going to buy G-Wagons, and very wealthy customers will buy them. And so now you have something that looks like, pretty much like a G-Wagon has always looked for 30 odd years. But now it has, a modern Mercedes interior that looks like it's straight out of an E-Class.
I do like the interior in the G-Wagon. Do the doors, I hope the doors still click shut like old school Mercedes, because that's what impressed me the most. Every year we do a local auto writers sort of winter vehicle roundup thing, and 1 year Ezra Dyer, who was writing for Automobile at the time, convinced Mercedes to send a G-Wagon up and put a Curtis plow on it. And so it was there, and we took it for a ride, and yeah, it was definitely old Mercedes, just in the best of ways. You get in, the doors just effortlessly just click shut with that sound, that like that was the E-Class, that was the S-Class, that was what Mercedes were. And it was just impressive in that way. And yeah, and I was also charmed by it because I think it was made, I think the factory that it was made in also built Vanagons. And then I think it was building BMW X3s by that point. It was interesting to know the history. So,
yeah. I mean, it always has been and still is made, at the Steyr Puck factory in Graz, Austria, which is now Magna Steyr. And and of course, since it's made in Graz, they had to bring out something else made in Graz, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger, to proclaim his love for the G-Wagon, and how he has long owned G-Wagons and always loved them and adored them. And strangely enough, he made no mention of his former adoration for the Hummer. Since he was the one who convinced AM General and then GM to build the H1 for civilian purposes, because it was at the time it was always just a military vehicle. No mention of that one, but he does love his G-Wagons.
Well, let's also be very clear. Arnold may have been born in Austria, but he was made in America.
That's a very good point.
Okay. We've had enough fun with that. Our predictions, by the way, for North American Car and Truck of the Year, I think, how did we do?
I think we predicted them all correctly, if I'm not mistaken, and if not, we'll have to go back and re-edit last week's show. The car of the year is the 2018 Honda Accord. The utility of the year was the Volvo XC60, and the truck of the year was also a utility, the Lincoln Navigator.
Yeah, and I think maybe we had some split opinion on the Navigator or the Expedition, but we figured it would be one of those two. And so it is one of those two. So
first time ever for a big award like that for Lincoln.
Good for them. Their sales, I think, are actually up. For what it sounds like, I would like to talk to Lincoln, just to see like what their plan is. Like, I think they could probably do better, and apparently they're doing okay. But they could probably do better if they let people know that they're still alive instead of just like having weird Matthew McConaughey tie-ups. I mean, the Navigator that's an impressive relaunch. It looks great. I think it's the right combo of capability, luxury, and tech. So and it's unique among the big trucks. It's not like the Tahoe or the Escalade even. It's different. And
I mean, everybody I've talked to that's driven it, is really impressed by it. And I've got one scheduled now for the end of next month. So I'll right after I'll be going from the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk into the Navigator.
Should be a good time.
Yeah.
The Grand Cherokee Trackhawk could probably tow the Navigator and still out accelerate it.
Maybe, yeah, possibly.
I'd be
assuming that the Grand Cherokee Trackhawk can get any traction in February weather in Michigan.
Well, I mean, it's got command track or whatever they call it, quadra.
I don't know if the Trackhawk does or not.
It's got to have some kind of all-wheel drive.
With my luck, they'll probably send it on summer tires.
Just drive it anyway. I'm sorry I bent your thing. You should have sent it with the right tires. That's probably not the best way to continue to get vehicles. So did you have any questions? We had one from Facebook, actually, that I assigned to you, because you can assign questions with Facebook, and I don't think anybody's seen it. Yeah, and I have this problem where I don't know how to use Facebook, and I don't want to.
Well, what was the question?
Hang on, let me dig it up. Let's see. It came in a few weeks ago, and it's loading because it needs to load all of its tracking things. It's from Tyson. And he enjoys the show. He likes the longer podcast. He wants us to talk about budget endurance racing more often and maybe even try it. So, I'd love to try lemons.
I'm assuming he's referring to things like lemons.
I would love to try lemons. Yeah.
It's fun to watch, and I mean a bunch of my friends do it. A bunch of the auto journalists around here are involved in lemons racing. Mike Austin, Tony Swan, they all race lemons cars, and it for those not familiar with the Lemons series, debuted about 9-10 years ago,
maybe even it started getting real notice then. I think it's actually older than that.
So the basic premise behind Lemons is that competitors are not allowed to spend more than $500 on the car. The only thing that they can go over 500, beyond $500. So the $500 does not include safety equipment. So roll cage and fire extinguishers. So that's not counted towards the $500 budget. And, you basically bring whatever you want, for up to $500 to the track, and you go and run it for, 10, 12, 24 hours with your friends, and whoever is still running at the end and happens to go the farthest wins. And if perchance anybody happens to be going suspiciously fast, any other competitors can challenge and buy the car for $500. And so, you have an incentive not to overspend just to get a little faster, because, if you go too fast, then anybody else can buy the car off of you, and you may lose your investment. So, it's a pretty cool series, and there's some very creative cars that show up for Lemons races.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're upside down. They have all kinds of weird bodies on them. They have, shall we say, less than stock combinations of powertrains and chassis and bodies. So there's some interesting stuff out there if you want to check it out.
I love it, because I think that it's so pure in terms of racing. It's like, find a thing with wheels, put the powertrain you want in it. It's not, it's not like NASCAR, right? Is a spec series. Those cars, they're not stock cars.
There's nothing spec about Lemons.
Yeah. And it's not to diminish from any of the other sort of much more organized and professional series, but I like sort of how loose Lemons is, and they've tied it up a bit as they've sort of grown into it. Because racing is an endeavor, and so insurance and costs, and they did discover, like, hey, we really do have to officialize some of this. But it's still really, at its base level, it's going around a track, at speed for as long as you can, and just having a good time. It's how we all got to high school every day. So, I like budget endurance racing. I would like to actually do some of it one of these days. So, he also wanted us to have a good long talk on an upcoming episode, so we can just tee this up, is just to sum up our thoughts on how soon automated cars and transport trucks will we be actually on the road. I think at one point on the podcast, both you and I said, like, we're not going to see them anytime soon, but maybe dig into that topic a little more.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk about that some more. I guess it depends on kind of how you're defining it. Are we talking about the majority of cars being automated, or having a handful of cars automated? I mean, if it's a handful, there's a handful out there on the road today, in a variety of different locations, and then it spreads out from there. GM. We didn't talk about this earlier, but at the end of last week, just before the auto show, GM announced the Cruise AV, which is not a Chevy Cruise, but is in fact a Chevrolet Bolt automated vehicle with no steering wheel, pedals, or mirrors. And I saw it today. I had a meeting at the Renaissance Center this morning, and they had it on display in the lobby. And it's got no mirrors, no human controls at all, and they've submitted an application for a waiver to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to allow them to build up to 2,500 of these next year. And so I think it's probably reasonable to assume that NHTSA is going to approve it, because the current administration does not seem to have stomach for any kind of actual regulations. And so, they will almost certainly give them the green light to go ahead and build these and deploy them next year. And, and GM has promised to do that, to deploy autonomous Bolts in 2019.
And I think on a larger scale, we probably are going to see automation proliferate more in things like shipping and public transport and stuff like that. That's probably where you're going to see it catch on faster and more deeply than personal cars. But that's my speculation.
Yeah, and again, kind of depends on how you're defining automation. There's a company out of California called Peloton Technologies that's developed a truck platooning system, and they've been testing it, and it's actually going to be deployed pretty soon. Like if it hasn't already launched in a couple of states, it will be launching very soon, to allow trucks to operate very close together on the road. Basically the following, the lead truck is sending signals over vehicle to vehicle communications to the following truck, enabling it to basically tuck right in underneath in the draft. And testing has shown that you can save up to 10% in fuel consumption doing that. So those are that's another one that's on the road now, and there will be a lot more of those in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think it seems that what's motivating Tyson to fret about this stuff is that he's a professional truck driver, and so is his wife, or his wife is a transit bus driver. So they talk about it, and neither he or his wife. I'm reading his emails. So he's saying, I don't think she or I will be replaced anytime soon. Although the Grand Tour guys say it's probably 20 years away. I think that timeline is possibly too long. I think we're going to see more automation in less than 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it depends.
Like I said,
it's going to depend on the applications. And, certainly I think for trucking, especially long haul trucking, one of the issues that they have in the trucking industry is, there actually really is a shortage of truck drivers. Increasingly young drivers don't want to drive long haul trucks. And the average age of long haul truckers has been climbing steadily over the last 10 or 15 years, and I think it's in the mid to upper 50s now.
Yeah. But part of that though is like that's not necessarily just that they don't want to drive the trucks; it's how the drivers are treated.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a factor. But I mean, even for owner operators, the cost of doing it, versus what you make. And the workload, I mean, it's not an easy job. It's a tough job to drive for drive a Class 8 truck for 10 hours a day. And, there's a lot of people that are, more and more, it's hard to find people that are interested in doing that. I mean, there's obviously some people, but it's tough to recruit people into that line of work. And so, I think we're going to see a mix of, automation taking over, but I think a lot of the people that are doing it now, they're going to be approaching retirement age anyway, as they, get to the point where their jobs are likely to be lost to automation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last time we really romanticized trucking was the 70s.
Yeah.
So maybe we just need another CB boom.
There you go.
Yeah. So, and he wraps up. He says that he heard you drove on the Ridge Racetrack in Washington State, and he says that that's his favorite track in the Pacific Northwest. So.
It's a fantastic track. That's where I drove the Civic Type R last fall, and did about 20 laps in the Type R, and it was so much fun. And the other thing that's fun there at the Ridge is they also have a go-kart track there that is a 1/4 scale replica of the full-size track.
Oh, that's awesome. So,
all the same profiles, just a 1/4 scale, and you can race karts on there.
Speaking of budget racing.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, if you're interested in, getting into, racing on a budget, I mean, there's a number of ways you can do it. One of them is go-karts. There's also autocross, is a fairly affordable way of getting into motorsports, without blowing too big a fortune. But as Roger Penske once said, the quickest way to make a small fortune in racing is to start with a large one.
Yeah. And yes, it's expensive, but so is other stuff like boating, for example.
Oh yeah.
And it's not anywhere near as thrilling.
Well, it depends what kind of boat you're sailing, but
car people are better.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely.
I was always interested in the engines in the boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've done it. It's an hour and a half. I think it's time. Unless there's anything else you wanted to cover.
No, I think that's good for this week.
All right. Good. Well, we'll catch up with everybody next week. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.